You know what time it is, guys.
People better get us now. That's all. You better get us now, because it's coming.
It is coming. It's the Big East tournament, baby. Let's go. You're locked on.
You are Locked On UConn, your daily podcast on the UConn Huskies, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks for making Locked On UConn your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Before we dive into today's show, I want to take a moment to say how thankful we are for all of you and appreciate all of your support. We're proud to say we're the only daily podcast covering the UConn men's and women's basketball programs, the hoops capital of the world, and we're thrilled to bring you the coverage you deserve. Today's episode is brought to you by Intuit TurboTax. Check out their taxes, get a free estimate, everything that comes with it. Tax is not anything you want to mess around with. Definitely want to check that out. But what we want to talk about today is the basketball equivalent to New Year's Eve or Christmas Day, in whatever you want to call it. For us Big East fans, it's the Big East tournament, and I can't stress that enough. By the time this comes out, we will have games starting for the Big East tournament, and want to give you a full Big East breakdown. We're going to have a great episode today. I'm pumped to be joined by someone who knows the Big East inside and out, Casey Matthews. Casey spent 12 years in Division I college hoops with stops at UNC Dub, who just won their league last night, Southern Miss, North Dakota State, most recently spending 5 years at Creighton. You might know them in the Big East before stepping away from coaching. He is in New York City right now, still breaking down hoops on Roll Jays, a Creighton podcast. Definitely go check that out. And, of course, rooting for his Jays from afar. So let's get Casey to the program now. Casey, welcome in. All right, so I think you echo my sentiment about how exciting it is to be in New York City, because I wish I was there with you, although I don't think anyone wants me there spreading COVID to the masses. But the Big East tournament, how important is it to come into this tournament playing hot?
Yeah, well, first of all, we definitely don't want you here with COVID.
No.
I was a part of the game that got shut down at halftime against St. John's. So, I don't want to be a part of that again. Being hot coming into this tournament, I think depending on your team could be really important. I think for I look at it like this. If you're a young team, never been a part of something like this before, you can kind of just say, hey, look, our regular season's over. We're going to go into this tournament and see what we've got. When you're a team that's maybe a little older and has some expectations, being hot, I think, is important, because you want some confidence and you want to come into this tournament really feeling like you can win it. And what's interesting is every coach is going to say, we believe we're going to win every game. You have to say that. There's plenty of times, though, where you come into these deals and you're going, gosh, I hope we don't have to play X team, Sure. And so it's just like an NCAA tournament, and that matchups are so important, but certainly being hot can play to your advantage in this deal 100%.
So we said, obviously you do a podcast called Roll Jays. So you are a former Creighton coach.
Yeah.
What do you see about? Let's talk about your squad first. Everyone was expecting us to do right into UConn. No, let's flip the script on them. What do you love about Creighton, and what are the flaws that you see? So give me like one pro, one con, as we step into this. Not win or go home. I think they're secure. UConn secure. St. John's obviously. I think the only team that is still bubblish is Xavier.
Yeah, I think Xavier's going to be in.
Me too.
But in terms of strengths and weaknesses, I mean, the obvious strength is Ryan Kalkbrenner and Stephen Ashworth. From a actual style of play, Creighton doesn't foul. Okay, and that is a huge deal. in these settings, when you're not giving your opponents points from the free throw line, you're going to be in games. And you've seen it for the last about 5 years or so, where the foul rate has really decreased for Creighton. We've almost led the country like every year. It's a big deal. It's a focus in every practice. So that to me is a huge strength. Weakness wise,
can I stop you right there and ask a question as to how does one? It just give me a nuance of what something like what is Greg McDermott teaching? Don't give away trade secrets, but I'm curious about what's the focus? Like, how do you not foul? Like, just give me like the layman's term on it.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it is just keeping your hands wide for one, but two is when you're going to have contact at the rim, is keep your hands straight up. So, and this isn't a secret. I mean, it's just a drill. It's a common basketball drill. But what Coach Mack will do is put guys in situations where they have to take contact at the rim, and because of the rules with the half circle, you have to be elevated. You have to jump. So what he does is he'll make you jump and keep your arms straight up in the air while taking contact. If you bring your arms down and foul, you go again. So it's almost every day, if not every day, that they do this drill. And it's, when you look at it, you look at the way they play defense, it's the drop coverage on ball screens, a lot of bend, don't break. And the reason why you can do that is because you have that big giant back there who's not going to foul you. So, when you talk about a guy like Ryan, who blocks a ton of shots, and it's very cliche, but it's true, is he affects and alters almost every shot taken on the defensive end. And, so when you can do that and play without fouling like that, it allows you to play more minutes, obviously, and it keeps free points off the board.
For sure. Sorry, I kind of hijacked your pros and cons, but that's I think that's interesting because of UConn's converse of that, which is they are a very foul happy team. And I wonder, and this is nothing against, because you just explained what Coach Mack does. I wonder though, as time goes on, like you set a standard, so you're known as we don't foul. So like when you go into a game, if there's a questionable call, a ref's gonna go, that's not a foul. You know what I mean? Do you understand what I mean? And I think and I think that's fair. And I think the frustration on the UConn side, just to kind of be in the fan seat, is that when you play the Creighton, Creighton teams that don't foul, you're like, well, I thought that was a foul, and if that's us, that's definitely a call. You know what I mean? So I think there's a little bit of that that comes with it. But let's get into the actual games. If it comes down to it, and it's UConn versus Creighton in the semifinal, because there's work that needs to be done before then. But the reason why I wanted to have you on is because I want to know, how does a Creighton team beat a UConn team that at that point would have won 5 straight, and also is going to be playing in a building that is going to be pretty heavy UConn.
Pretty heavy is an understatement. How do you beat UConn? I'll tell you this, I don't have the numbers to back it up, but I'd almost bet you that the highest winning percentage in the Big East against UConn has to be Coach Mack. And
it is.
Yeah. And so again, with UConn, there's so many things, because hey, I know I'm in the minority here as a Creighton guy. I love Coach Hurley. So the way he coaches, the way he runs his program off the court, I love him. I think he's fantastic. So, but if you look at his offenses, he runs a lot of sets. He runs a lot of sets that are what I would call A to B to C. So you're going to run this action that's going to lead you to another action, which is going to lead you to another action. Well, it's difficult to guard because there's all kinds of screens and there's all kinds of rescreens and flares and staggers. I mean, it's the list goes on in terms of what they do. If you look at their possession length, UConn has one of the highest possession lengths offensively in the country. Okay, and because of those offensive sets. So for me, in terms of Creighton's defense and guarding them, it's guarding their actions, knowing kind of what's coming, which again, it's something Creighton's always been traditionally very good at, is studying opponents and preparing, scouts, but taking them out of what they're trying to actually score with. Okay. Because a lot of, as you know, Mark, a lot of these actions aren't necessarily trying to score with it. You're trying to get yourself in a position to have a mismatch, to have a Liam McNeely being guarded by a Stephen Ashworth. Okay.
Sure.
That's what you're trying to get to. And so if Creighton can do a good job communicating, switching when they need to switch, being physical at the point of ball screens, that to me is a way that I think they can. You never want to say shut down. You're not going to shut them down, but a way you can give yourself a chance on the defensive end. Offensively, it's no secret Creighton has to hit shots. More than that, though, and what I was getting to in my weakness is Creighton's not a very good team at taking care of the ball. That to me is our Achilles heel offensively. The last game that UConn beat us, we only had 10 turnovers. It's not like it was anything crazy. But if you turn the ball over 10 times in Madison Square Garden against UConn and it leads to run out dunks or big threes, that's a recipe for disaster. And that building, I've played against UConn on a Friday night in that building. It's electric. And so, and then I was a part of, I've witnessed UConn Villanova Friday night a couple years ago. We had just won, and so I was there scouting, and it's to this day the coolest basketball memory I have, besides games that I was a part of. So it's going to be nuts, Mark. You know that, and so I think those are the things that we got to do to give ourselves a chance. The obvious, right? Like, don't foul because we need Kalkbrenner in the game. But,
sure.
Hope that answers it a little bit.
Yeah, no worries. We're gonna take a quick break, and when we come back, we're gonna talk about some the ceiling and the floor for the top 4 teams, not just for the Big East tournament, because I think the ceiling for them anywhere the top 4 teams is to win the thing. It's more about the NCAA tournament. Are we being devalued by the NCAA tournament selection committee, with pretty much half of our league is going to get a bid to the tournament, but we're also not going to be seated very high. So these are the questions I'm going to talk about with Casey Matthews coming up after the break. This is a message from our sponsor, Intuit TurboTax. Taxes used to be about waiting, wondering, and worrying if you'd get any money back. Now taxes is matched with the TurboTax expert who can do your taxes as soon as today. An expert who gives you your taxes, their undivided attention, working on your return while you get real-time updates so you can focus on your day. An expert who finds every deduction possible, files every form, every investment, everything with 100% accuracy. All so you can get the most money back guaranteed. No waiting, no wondering, no worries. Now, this is taxes. Get an expert now at TurboTax.com. Only available with TurboTax Live full service. Real-time updates available only in the iOS mobile app. See guarantee details at turbotax.com/guarantees. All right, we're back on Locked On UConn with Casey Matthews of Roll Jays, a podcast for the Creighton Blue Jays. All right, man, I have a question about this because I've had bracketologists on. I've had Evan Miyakawa. I've had people on that are, no disrespect, a lot smarter than you and I when it comes to these numbers and, where people should be seated. But I find it very hard to believe that those same people that have been espousing about the virtues of the SEC and some of the other power 2 or 3 conferences, that the Big East, which has won 4 of the last 8 national championships and been a force in college basketball for years, all of a sudden is just going to, come into the tournament, get their 7s and 8 seeds, and just kind of pack it in, maybe lose in the first round and go home. You have, and just think about it from this perspective. St. John's is ranked 6th in the country right now. I am not a St. John's fan. I'm not a St. John's hater either. Like, right. I think, now that they're relevant, I think, some of their fans are a little chirpier than they have been in a while, but that's okay. Everything comes back to the medium, right? We'll see how long that lasts. And so my question to you is, how does a team like let's just use St. John's as an example, 6th in the country. Their highest seed that I've seen them get, and tell me if I'm wrong if you've seen them anywhere, is a 3. So a 3 seed, about why? Like, give me your explanation.
Well, a lot of it is because of the net ranking. So they're
Yeah.
they're 15th in the net. So just mathematically, you're going to fall past the 2 line. But I think the other thing is offensively, they're just not great. And I think that in an NCAA tournament, great offense traditionally is going to beat great defense.
But Houston's hasn't been great for years, and they
That's
always
fair.
get a 1 or a 2 seed.
That's fair. I think in that situation, there probably is some bias, for the Big 12, and those SECs and Big Tens, like they absolutely do get more of the benefit of the doubt because, quote unquote, they play more good teams throughout the year. There's no off night, those sorts of things. I get it. But I think that's a good point. And I'm not necessarily saying they're getting knocked seed lines because they're not good offensively. I just think if I'm evaluating really where do they fit in, I think the bigger problem I have is or if we're going to include outside factors, is I just feel like there should be a Patino factor. I mean, he's one of the best coaches that's ever lived. And so, I certainly don't want to be on the other side of a game with him, especially in an NCAA tournament. So, yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I think with the rest of the league, I'd actually argue, Mark, that it's with Xavier, like right now, I think Xavier's playing as good as anybody in our league. And the way I would rank it, I would have Marquette as our 5th best team, and Xavier.
They're kind of floundering.
Yeah, I think Xavier would probably be my 2nd best team in the league right now.
As a coach, let me ask you this question, because I love Shaka Smart. I think he's when you have him in a press conference, when you listen to him, he cares so much about the way his kids play, and he's a special dude. And I'm going to use a very big but after this. And it's not about anything that has to do with anything about his character. Is he going to have what I like to call a Dan Hurley moment and go, all right, I have all of these athletic kids who are working their tails off for me on every given night, but I'm not creating a rotation that can give us some relief with guys who can hit shots, that can, create easy opportunities through action, and kind of change his style a little bit so that he can survive some of this stuff. Because listen, Marquette's had some of the best starts of any of these Big East teams for years, and they seem to just kind of trickle down from there. I mean, they lose to NC State last year. There's no way they should have lost to that NC State team. So, and then we're seeing it here. Like that game against UConn was an absolute war. The game against St. John's, an absolute war. They're losing. So maybe not the best example of this year's team, but they're still backsliding. And it's hard to ignore. Do you see that happening, or is he just going to keep going straight ahead?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think the one thing with Marquette, and the reason what I would attribute their hot starts to is continuity. They do a very good job of bringing guys back. And so that to me is part of it. And when you're playing early season games, and when you start practice, in October, and you're working through a lot of the basics, especially nowadays when you're bringing in transfers, and you're just trying to teach the system. And so, whereas when you are a Marquette team, where I just saw a stat, I should remember this, but there's a stat for like minutes continuity with them, and they're like top 20 in the country in that, right? So like there is a lot of continuity with Marquette, and I think that's a huge advantage. To me, what's interesting is if you look at their big guys, their 2 biggest players shoot more threes than twos. And so when you're a team like that, where you don't have an inside presence, you're relying so much on the perimeter. What they really rely on, though, is, to me, Cam has to be great for them to beat a good team. And in a tournament setting, it's special when you have your best player be special for 3 straight games or more in an NCAA tournament. But it doesn't always happen. You need somebody else. And certainly Joplin's a very good player, but I don't see him as a true number one. Stevie Mitchell to me is a liability. He's obviously a tremendous defender, but offensively, he really hurts them, and he really doesn't help space the floor at all. In fact, if you look at the way Creighton plays him, Creighton dorks him, sits in the lane, doesn't guard him. Please shoot. So I think that hurts them in that way. But in terms of style and what they're doing, when they had Oso and he was creating more, and then you had Kolek, you just had a lot of weapons. This year's team doesn't really have that same just like arsenal that they've had in the past, which is why I'm really questioning. You never want to, because I like Shaka as well. I think he's a great coach. I'm questioning how far they can go in the Big East tournament, let alone the NCAAs. So,
all right, you said that you think Marquette might be the fifth. Stack rank the teams in the Big East in the top five, the top five that we believe is going to make the NCAA tournament.
Yeah, right now I'd have to say St. John's as number one. I'd probably go Xavier number two, UConn 3. Creighton 4, Marquette 5.
Okay,
that's where I'd rank them.
All right, fair enough. I'm a homer, so I'll put UConn above Xavier, but I see the argument, and I think that's fair. And like honestly, man, like I'm still putting Creighton above Xavier because to me, like I want to see. I think Sean Miller's a great coach. I think Zach Fremantle's thank God he's healthy. Right. I think it's great to see him balling out a little bit and helping them, kind of hopefully get to that NCAA tournament. To me, I feel as if I want to see this. I want to see them make a little run in the Big East tournament, because I do see what you're saying, but I don't trust it yet. I don't, you know what I mean?
That's fair.
So
No, that's fair. And I think a lot of that too is that's just fresh for me. Xavier beat us pretty good not long ago. And so that's pretty fresh on my mind. I don't know what they've won like 7 in a row or, coming in. So they're really hot. And I think, Sean Miller's a great coach. Remember, they were preseason number 2, right? So, this is a very talented team that just took some time to figure it out, had some injuries. It's the same reason why I think UConn is really starting to roll now. Liam was out. When you have a freshman that's out, it takes longer than when you have a junior or senior that's out and then comes back. Freshmen take longer to get reacclimated to what's going on. He didn't get a lot of those reps that he would have normally gotten. So now he's, I think that's why UConn's so dangerous to me now, is they're hot and now they're playing. I love the way they are coming into this tournament and for both teams. And as much as I'd love to say my Jays are the best team coming in, I don't love the way we're coming in. And so that's, and we've won, we won a couple games, but that Xavier game is still fresh for me. And we haven't beaten a really good team in a little bit of time. So we'll see. I do think this is one of those years where something wild will happen. But I'm more of I'm always optimistic, but I try to be very realistic too, and not get my hopes up too much. But I certainly would love to see Ryan Kalkbrenner and Coach Mack cutting down that net, this weekend for sure.
I do not want that to happen, but we're going to talk about that coming up after the break. Looking to optimize your nutrition this year? Factor makes eating well easy with chef-prepared, dietitian-approved meals that are fresh, never frozen, and ready to heat and eat in just 2 minutes. With 40 options across 8 dietary preferences, every week you can customize your meals to fit your lifestyle, whether it's Calorie Smart, Protein Plus, or Keto. Plus, every Factor offer wholesome smoothies, breakfast, and grab-to-go snacks to keep you fueled all day long. I love how Factor takes the stress out of meal planning. I recently tried the Protein Plus meals, and they were packed with flavor and kept me full throughout the day. The convenience is unbeatable. No prep, no mess, just great food in minutes. Eat smart with Factor. Get started at factormeals.com/LockedOnCollege, $50 off, and use the code LockedOnCollege50 to get 50% off your first box plus free shipping. That's code LockedOnCollege50 at factormeals.com/LockedOnCollege50 to get 50% off plus free shipping on your first box. All right, we're back with Casey Matthews from Roll Jays Pod. Appreciate you being on. Last quick segment. I brought something up, and I want you to think about this. Do you think that because you mentioned about the net, because when I had a buddy of mine, and I've known him for years now, because when I was doing SoCon coverage, he was always like the guy would message like, "Hey, my buddy Wes Miller's UNCG team, they're creeping up in the net. Is there a chance if they don't win the tournament, can they still make the tournament?" And he was like, "No." And like those, but Rocco Miller of the Bracketeer.org has kind of blown up since there, and he is, for all of you that want Jerry Palm and Joe Lenardi's and the Michael DeCourcy's of the world, those guys get like 4 or 5 of these guys wrong on a regular basis. He's usually 67 out of 68, 66 out of 68. He has been thoroughly kicking their ass for a while, and he's on the fielding of the 68 on Field of 68 network, and so I always give him his flowers. He was on, and he basically said it's at this point, unless teams lose, it's hard for them to move up seed lines. And I asked him, does there need to be a change in, like, when a team beats a good team, like Creighton beats number 1 Kansas, like, shouldn't that win be locked in as you beat the number 1 team in the country at the time, versus that was a quad 1 win that's now been probably relegated to maybe a quad 2. I don't know. I have no idea where Kansas is. Yeah. So I do think that there's a better way to do this, so we get a true definition of the best 68 teams that are in, or who knows now, 76 is what they're thinking about, and they're going to talk about that in 90 days. So if they're truly trying to expand it, whatever that is, and I'm not in favor of that, right, is do you think that that's something that you could look at? Because each part of the season is almost like its own season, like those December bye games, the neutral site games, whether it's a multi-team event, whether all these different things. Then you have the conference tournament, or conference games. So each season and each time should almost be relegated into its own factor, and that's how you should kind of get like your final number at the end of the year.
Yeah, that's interesting. It is difficult, right? Because it's hard to schedule. It's just hard to schedule in general. But it's how could you ever plan on? Oh, I'm going to have the number 1 team in the country at our place, and that's what happened with this year.
Right,
you beat them, and it's not helping you.
It's crazy.
And so it's like, well, what's the advantage of playing that game other than, you got a big time sold out crowd, but Creighton's number 6 in the country in attendance anyways. So
right,
it's not like it's that big of a difference. So I certainly get it. I also think, you have to factor that in, or you're going to have other situations where you just do have teams that, you win that game. And then Kansas gets a couple guys hurt, let's say. And so they're just not the same team going into the NCAA tournament, right, as they were that you played them.
You know what I call it? It's kind of like the Kenyon Martin rule. Remember when Kenyon Martin, they were number 1 team in the country with Cincinnati?
Yes,
and they were the odds-on favorite to win the national title. And he broke his leg. And then I think they still got a 1 seed, maybe a 2 seed. And they lost in like the Sweet 16. They still were a good team.
Yeah. But
they had no shot to win the title.
Yeah.
If you beat that Kenyon Martin team, you were a great team.
Yep.
So you're trying to tell me that if I beat Kenyon Martin in January, and then I got to wait till March to some bracketologist to tell me that our team isn't good enough because Cincinnati backslid from there, like, that makes absolutely no sense to me.
Yeah, I definitely get it. I mean, I think that's interesting because the injury thing is a little bit different than just not being very good, whereas like you're ranked so highly because your preseason rank was high. You won some games that were okay. Maybe you won your MTE, but then the first time you go on the road against a real team, you lose, and you kind of get exposed.
Well, let me throw another thought wrench in the system here, which is, what if it's more just about the way that college basketball is today, where everything is so transactional, and everything is because hell, dude, we don't know what the hell what's going on at Creighton, but and I know a little bit about what's going on at UConn, and Dan told the whole world what's going on. About 50% of his team is looking to maybe have themselves out of stores, right? So if you think about it from that perspective, this is a 2-time national championship winning team that may lose 50% of its roster. So if you're telling me that this whole idea of transfer portal NIL isn't different and we shouldn't look at things differently, that's the kind of stuff I'm talking about. Is you need to lock in certain things so that it's truly the best teams playing, not just it's that way. There's a premium on coaches that keep their teams together and consistently win and actually are starting to play better down the stretch. Because from what I got from that conversation from Rocco Miller is that these last 4 games and this winning streak that UConn's on, and even if they go on and win the Big East tournament, it's not going to really do much for them seeding wise. He said maybe one line.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. Well, I don't think a lot of people understand about the NCAA tournament seeding and how a lot of it works. And I was really fortunate during my time at Creighton. Bruce Rasmussen was our athletic director for a large part of that time. Bruce was the chair of the selection committee, and so I got a chance many times to talk to him and ask. And he always would tell us, like, guys, when it gets time to do that, conference tournaments aren't really playing a factor. The bracket's pretty much set, and now it's just about bid stealers. And you maybe can move up a line, but it's really hard to do it based on your conference tournament. And that was really interesting.
Did he ever talk to you about the blue blood bump?
He never said anything about the blue blood bump. I'll have to ask him next time I see him.
That would be a very interesting question, because I've heard that exists. Like if you have a Kansas, you got a Duke, and Duke's obviously the number 1 overall seed. But if you have a North Carolina, like the only reason why North Carolina is even being talked about in a bubble situation is because they're a blue blood. Indiana, these
a lot of that is, I'm assuming, just because you want them. You want to give them a better shot to win a game, because you're gonna sell more tickets and you're gonna have a better environment. So
exactly,
yeah, I get it. All I know is I can't wait. I can't wait for. We got 54 minutes till tip, right? Is that right?
That's correct.
I did the math wrong. We got a great Big East tournament on deck. We got an exciting NCAA tournament coming up. It's the best time of the year. I told my wife, she actually jokes with me now. To me, it's Christmas. And she didn't like that the first time I said it, but now she commonly makes the joke for me. So it's Christmas time if you're a hoops fan. I know that.
For sure, man. Well, listen, Casey, it was great to have you on. We'll definitely have to do it again sometime. Really appreciate you, giving some insight into not even just Creighton, but the whole Big East as a whole. So
it was great. This was awesome. I really had a great time, Mark. Thanks for having me on.
No, my pleasure is all mine. All right. This has been another episode of Locked On UConn. For Casey Matthews, I'm Mark Sneto, asking you guys to stay locked on, stay connected, and make sure those toughest meters are rising. And, dude, it's Big East tournament.
Let's go.
Go Huskies.